The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
In a 6-3 split, the Supreme Court struck down some of Trump's tariffs this morning, and he is not happy. Justices Roberts, Gorsuch, and Barrett voted with the 3 liberal justices, and in his press conference about the decision, he made his anger at Gorsuch and Barrett, specifically who he nominated, quite clear. And we'll get into more what he might be doing next. But first, Cenk, what are your thoughts on this decision?
Yeah, there's 2 sides to this. Is the decision right or wrong? And I'll give you Trump's point of view. And 3 justices did vote for him, and it's not crazy, but ultimately he was wrong, and I'll explain why. But also the fallout from it. You know, he's now threatening to destroy a country. So what does that mean? Let's find out.
Here's what you need to know. The US Supreme Court said President Trump's tariff policies imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, are unconstitutional, dealing a major blow to the president's signature economic policy. In his majority opinion, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, "In light of the breadth, history, and constitutional context of that asserted authority, we must identify clear congressional authorization to exercise it." Roberts wrote, concluding Trump has not. Now, the government could be on the hook for more than $175 billion in refunds to corporations. The potential refunds to a broad range of companies would be for tariffs already collected by the government, since Trump slapped on the duties without authorization from Congress. But let's get back to that press conference for a moment for more of his reaction, starting with this.
Justices Gorsuch and Barrett, are you surprised in particular by their decision today? And do you regret nominating them?
I don't want to say whether or not I regret. I think their decision was terrible. Yeah. I think it's an embarrassment to their families. You want to know the truth, the 2 of them.
Now, singling out those justices specifically could make for a tense dynamic at the State of the Union next week, and he was asked about that.
Are they still invited to your State of the Union next week? And will you speak with them?
They are invited, barely. Barely. 3 are happily invited. No, they're barely invited. Honestly, I couldn't care less if they come, okay?
It's so fragile. And in his press conference, he let the mask slip about what the tariffs were ultimately being used for.
Now the court has given me the unquestioned right to ban all sorts of things from coming into our country, to destroy foreign countries, but a much more powerful right than many people ever thought we even had, but not the right to charge a fee. How crazy is that?
Now, Trump is saying he has a plan B. The US will impose a 10% global tariff, President Trump announced on Friday, to replace many of the duties ruled illegal by the Supreme Court in a decision that morning. The new tariffs will be imposed under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, Trump said, which allows the president to impose tariffs for up to 150 days. During that time, Trump said they would also begin new tariff investigations under Section 301 of the Trade Act, which can result in more permanent tariffs. Cenk, what do you make of this?
Yeah, so I want to explain the legal side of it first. So the Trump administration said the IEEPA, which is a law, gave them the right to impose these tariffs. Why? Because they're the emergency power, the executive branch does and the president does, to deal with regulation and imports. Like, well, imports, that's tariffs, right? So understand that when you go to the court, usually, although sometimes Trump's side doesn't even bother making a case or presenting evidence, which is stunning. But in this case, they did, and it's a legitimate argument. And they say, okay, because it says those 2 words, this law applies and supersedes the part of the Constitution that says that Congress has to enact taxes, not the executive branch, not the president, right? So the Supreme Court said to that, no, the Constitution is above any bill that you pass. And the Constitution is not unclear at all. Congress has to do taxes, not the president. and the president cannot unilaterally impose a tax, and tariffs are indisputably a tax. Second of all, the law that you're talking about doesn't say anything about tariffs. So if Congress had an intent to override the Constitution on tariffs, they would have mentioned tariffs in that bill, and they didn't. So it's like his case is not absurd, but it's clearly wrong. So that's why the courts kind of didn't have a choice, in my opinion, if they're trying to interpret the law in a sane way, and so obviously the Constitution supersedes, and they've got to follow it, right? So okay, so that's the good news, and they did their job. At the same time, I have to note that a lot of people have a misnomer about the Supreme Court. We've talked about this on the Young Turks many times. Oh, are they right wing or are they left wing? Are they Republicans or are they Democrats? No, the Supreme Court is mainly picked based on how much they'll serve corporate power. So that's why Gorsuch is on there, because he said in one case, he was the only judge that looked at it at any level, and they said that if you don't follow your company's orders to freeze to death, then you should be fired. Okay, that's a real case, you could look it up.
All right, it's time for New Year's resolutions. We all make them, but I'm not making any big flashy resolutions that are gonna crash and burn by February. My reset is much simpler. It's about giving myself a break in the kitchen. Not by eating less, don't be crazy. But let's be honest, thinking about what to eat, shopping for it, cooking it, it's a drain. And when you're drained from cooking, you can't focus on the work that matters, and that's the work right here. That's where Cook Unity comes in. It's been my way of cheating. Like I have a personal chef. I'm very fancy that way, please. But without the insane cost. Restaurant quality meals on my schedule. So I ordered a bunch of things that I loved. So we got the pepperoni naan pizza. I love pepperoni pizza, I love naan. You put it together, it's genius. Golden chicken schnitzel. It's schnitzel, but it's golden. Okay, this stuff is all so good. New Orleans shrimp and grits, they have sausage in there too. Love it. And that's my point, guys. These aren't boring and repetitive meals. These are all-star chefs, Food Network alum, and James Beard winners. Handpicking seasonal ingredients and balancing bold flavors with nutrition. Every meal is a small batch masterpiece delivered fresh, never frozen. It makes hitting wellness goals effortless because a nutritious, incredible meal is ready in minutes. No shopping, no cooking, no cleanup. You can browse by chef, by cuisine, filter macros to the gram, not a thing I would do, but you could. And it's way less than takeout or even grocery store prices. Plus their packaging is part of a reusable, eco-friendly program. You can't ask for more. Taste comfort and craftsmanship in every bite from the award-winning chefs behind Cook Unity. Go to cookunity.com/TYT or enter code TYT before checkout to get 50% off your first order. That's 50% off your first order by using code TYT or going to cookunity.com/TYT.
And guess which side Gorsuch went with here? He went with against Trump and against the tariffs. Why? The Chamber of Commerce and corporate interests are against tariffs. So 3 of the justices, even though they're conservative or Republican, voted with what seems like, it's not really the liberals, that's why I'm saying it's a misnomer. They voted with corporations. They almost always vote with corporations. Obama and Clinton used to brag about how the justices they appointed were so in favor of business interests. So it's come from both sides, that conclusion. Now in this case, I think they're right anyway, but I want you to understand their motivations, and you'll see that most often, they're not following the law strictly. They're not following right wing or left wing strictly. They're almost always vote in favor of corporate power above anything else. And that's also what happened here. Now, when you turn to Trump's reaction, obviously maniacal as always, right? And I've got this killer quote here. First of all, they're an embarrassment to their families. I mean, no one knows how to do trolling better than Trump and insults like if we talked about this before too, like if his career path was as an insult comic like Jeff Ross or something, that would have made a lot of sense. He'd have been pretty good at that, right? But to me, the killer line, Jordan, is at some point he said, but I'm allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with that same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade, I can destroy the country. Who is like, this is why we told you to vote against Trump. because this is how he thinks. I can destroy anyone and anything in my path. What I'm worried about is the country he's going to destroy is us, not anyone else.
Yeah. And that type of isolationist policy or thinking is something that we see in other aspects of his policy. And for other countries, why would you want to negotiate with somebody like that? Why would you go out of your way to help a country like that? It's why you don't see people buying into his Board of Peace plan. And it's why you see people thumbing their nose at the idea of trade negotiations for these tariffs. Like the guy is a tyrant. But the piece that interests me is the refunds, because we're going to see a prolonged, drawn out battle over that, because those corporations are going to want their money back. There is a slew of lawsuits already over those rebates or refunds, because they argued that those were enacted and implemented illegally, which was confirmed today by the Supreme Court. But the piece that's interesting to me is, what about the people? What about the people who had to pay higher prices for the past several months because those corporations passed those costs of those tariffs onto the consumer? So those corporations ultimately brought in more gross revenue. They had to pay some to the government. They want that money back, but they got it from both sides. What do we get? We get nothing. And also, corporations love to use moments like this, just like they did with the supply chain crisis that led to higher inflation in 2022. They like to blame those moments on, or say that those are justifications for raising prices rather than letting it affect their bottom line. They pass those costs on to us, but then they keep the prices high and they continue to grow. So we're already seeing higher prices off of the supply chain and inflation crisis of the middle of Biden's term, and then they got higher with this. They're not going to bring those costs down, so they want a refund and keep the prices high. And at the end of the day, we all get screwed, and it is effectively yet another transfer of wealth from the working class to the top. We've seen it time and time again. This is no different.
See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So they pass or state a perfectly reasonable conclusion on this case, but then they come in with Salt Bae and sprinkle in a little bit of, oh, here's $175 billion to corporations. Yeah, and plus you can kill your workers if you want. I mean, it's absurd. Wait a minute, we paid the tariffs. They raised prices on us. Where's our refund? Supreme Court says, no, you didn't get me elected or selected to the Supreme Court. My beautiful Chamber of Commerce did. I served them. So now we got to pay back the corporations 175. Nah, that's maddening, man. Maddening. Of course, as usual, the American people get bupkis, nothing. So you got no ally in Trump, you got no ally in the Supreme Court, and Trump says, I'm gonna do 10% anyway. I don't care. I don't care what the law says. So you're still gonna have higher prices. And later corporations will want you to double pay for that too.
I guess the one last thing I want to say before we got to go to break is we saw this in a conversation on Fox yesterday on the topic of a wealth tax, making the wealthy corporations pay more, both in New York and in California. And Jesse Waters, just a grotesque individual, but said the billionaires should get out ahead of this and employ a bread and circuses strategy with this superficial appeasement, where they should just, he was being disgusting, saying buy everyone a value meal from McDonald's, or make the homeless people fight for entertainment like you would the gladiators. But even on this point, that appeasement was the refund checks, or the rebate checks that Trump had kind of tossed out there, but was never firmly committed to, potentially up to $2,000. He was asked about that recently by a reporter, and he said, I did that?
Yeah.
Didn't even remember making that promise. And now, of course, we certainly will not see that, because he's going to say that his hands are tied because he has to pay back the corporations because of litigation. So no matter what, we're getting screwed.
Yep.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.